Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thanks for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. Grace Wangeshi is the Executive Director, the Independent Medical Legal Unit. Good morning, Grace.
Good morning.
Lovely having you here on the broadcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for waking up and showing up. Cornelius Oduor is the Deputy Executive Director, the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Good morning.
Good morning.
Lovely having you here on the broadcast. And Devas Kiprono is here with us in studio. He's being mic'd up shortly. He will be joining us. He's the Deputy Executive Director, ICJ Kenya. Lady and gentlemen, much appreciated for your time. So, Grace, beginning with you, a lot has happened since last year, and this largely touching on our governance space. But what's the civil society's view of what's happening in the country?
Thank you, and good morning, viewers. We would want to first acknowledge and pass our condolences to all Catholics to begin with, who are mourning the death of the Pope, but also families that are mourning the loss of their loved ones following the floods. Thank you for that question. I think from the civil society organizations, we have highlighted what we are calling the State of the Nation report. And the reason for us highlighting this is that Kenyans need to be kept informed on what is happening in the country. We do feel that the leadership has let Kenyans down, right from human rights violations to corruption matters to lack of accountability. And if you allow me, I would like to start with the state of human rights violations in the country, starting from what we have seen the last 2 years. It's been there, but the last 2 years, so to speak, we are disturbed by the growing trend of increased, extrajudicial killings, increased disappearance of persons, arbitrary arrests, but the most unfortunate thing out of all those is a lack of accountability. We have seen leaders get away with impunity. Nobody is being held to account for their violations. And it's really disturbing that to date we still have 26 persons missing from last year's protests. And so the fact that nothing seems to be done is a concern for us. And why one of the key reasons we have issued our State of the Nation report is to also just remember that why we exist is humanity. And no one seems to be reflecting on the plight of Kenyans who've either been survivors or victims of all these atrocities that have been, meted out by the government. Yet the government is supposed to be protecting citizens. And so we are here, a very concerned team of civil society leaders, and wishing to just highlight the concerns that we have. And hopefully the government will take a turnaround and safeguard the Constitution, because that is what is the basis of our conversation today.
Okay. Cornelius, doesn't this then raise the fundamental question of the place of institutions? Because if you look at human rights violations, corruption, lack of accountability, all this, the framework of the Constitution provides safeguards and guardrails. Why are institutions unable to address these very glaring problems that you have pointed out as organizations?
The Constitution is very clear, and it has given these institutions the mandate to oversee the implementation of the Constitution, starting with Parliament, to oversight the executive, the judiciary, to interpret laws. But these institutions have not been given space. Increasingly, we are seeing a lot of interference, especially from the executive. So, by and large, these institutions have failed to uphold the Constitution. And when you see in the last opinion poll by Infotrack, the president getting an approval rating of 19%, what does that tell you? He has not kept most of the promises he made, and Kenyans are really worried. Actually, those statistics show that 69% of Kenyans point to this poor rating or lack of achievement of the aspirations of Kenyans to the person of the President William Ruto. So it tells you that this government was big on promises, and it has fundamentally failed to deliver on those promises. If you look at the better plan, it's arguably one of the best economic blueprints that was ever shared. But its execution has been marred by vested interest how these plans have been implemented shows that there was no political goodwill. This was just a populist document that Kenyans are quickly coming to terms that they were hoodwinked into putting a government in place that had no political commitment to fulfill most of the promises it made.
Yeah. Then how can then be addressed or remedied? Because it equally raises the other fundamental question, which is the ballot question. I mean, unlike other instances or spaces, Kenya is granted by its wonderful constitution the opportunity, at least in a 5-year cycle, to go and install a leadership. Then what's your end of here the bargain? Because the question of awareness is key. How then are you imparting the public to make that conscious decision at the ballot? Because if a manifesto isn't delivered, it's equally important that then you have to do that change at the ballot level, which is the very essence of democracy.
Sure. Kenyans must understand that it's one thing to have a good constitution. It's another thing to live by that constitution. We talk about constitution and constitutionalism. The political culture in Kenya today is one that is to blame, because Kenyans, when they go to the ballot, probably they have not exercised their right to vote and utilize their political decision rightly. Because we end up with people who don't fit, who have integrity issues, and therefore we entrust them with the responsibility to govern. And I think until that time, when Kenyans realize the power of vote and why it's very important to make very clear these choices between who to put in office and who not to put in office, we'll continue having these problems. Probably this is also a good lesson for Kenyans, so that next time we go to the ballot, we must be able to check the track records of some of these people aspiring to occupy office. Because why is Parliament failing? Is it that they're not paid? They have everything that they want, that they need in this world. In fact, our MPs are the most rewarded globally. Why are they not holding the executive to account? And it only tells you that this government has presided over the death of institutions through making very wrong appointments to some of these offices, for the appointive offices. And also we have people who don't merit to be in Parliament, and that's why they are not able to their constitutional and cadre responsibility.
Demas, how then do we pull ourselves out of this governance slump? Because all the three thematic areas, the human rights violations, corruption, lack of accountability, is a common denominator, even in previous administrations.
Thank you, Ayub, for having me. Well, the constitution that we gave ourselves was actually a tool for how we were supposed to be governed. It was a tool that we were supposed to use to change certain patterns that we had seen with an overbearing presidency, not very independent judiciary, and lack of devolved units. And so when we gave ourselves a new constitution, there were certain expectations. However, what we've seen over the last 15 or so years is a political class that is willing to take up the instruments that the constitution gives them, but an unwillingness to allow the constitution to function as it should have been. And so you find a situation where, in terms of leadership and integrity, the political class decided that is the area that we're not going to have interest in. In terms of two-thirds gender rule, no one is interested in. They are only interested in how to capture and keep power. And so perhaps we need to ask ourselves, how do we then take ourselves back to a moment where we live by the promises of our constitution? Right now, what we are seeing is a political class that has come together, and that coming together is not for the good of the people. And so, even if you see as the political class has come together, their priority is the NADCO report. The NADCO report is about creating offices. It is about political expediency. It's about how the political class will be comfortable, not about the plight of the Kenyans, not about the promise of economic, social, and cultural rights, not about the promise of freedom of expression or civic space, but about their own selfish needs. And so then you have to ask yourself, we've had a judiciary that has been proactive in terms of telling us where human rights are being violated, where the constitutional structure has been violated. A very good example is the CDF. As early as 2013, organizations went to court arguing that CDF in itself violates the structure of the Constitution because members of parliament are supposed to be legislators. They're not supposed to be implementing anything. What are you seeing now? An attempt to inculcate CDF into the Constitution. Yet the Supreme Court has spoken and said that it violates the structures. So as we sit here, we are in a quagmire where the political class is really not interested in the Constitution, except when it is giving power and responsibilities and privileges, not the responsibilities that it's supposed to deliver to the people of Kenya.
All right. Also joining us from the county of Homa Bay is Suba Churchill, the Executive Director of the Kenya National Civil Society Center. Suba, good morning to you. And certainly not the outcome expected by Kenyans. And that report, joint report, presents a rather grim picture of our governance space.
Yes, thank you very much, and I'm glad to be participating in this from outside Nairobi, from Homa Bay.
Yes, we'll get back to Suba once we establish our communication line with him, and he will be part of this conversation. Coming to you, Grace, then, taking this forward, Demas points a rather worrying picture of about the coming together of the president and the former prime minister, are certainly not addressing some of these major issues. But then how do we move this conversation away from the personalities to institutions and lay blame where they ought to be?
Let me start by going back to the question about the ballot, because that's where the power lies. Now, Kenyans need to be alive to the fact that we have the power to put in parliament, to put in the right leadership. And so we need to start, and people need to start rallying around to have political education reach out to everybody. One thing to know is that the minute I go to a ballot box, to the ballot to cast my vote, I, as an individual, have a responsibility to myself and to my country. So we have to start doing the right thing. We have to remember that the people we put in power are people that we employ. We are the ones who employ our leaders by the tax that we pay, by the fact that when you go into any shop, everything you buy, you pay some tax on it. And that is how we actually pay these lawmakers. And so going back to the question of institutions, the Constitution is very clear on the roles of the different mandates. The executive has its role, parliament has its role, judiciary has its role. And we also have the constitutional commissions and other bodies that have been set up. One, to oversight and ensure that the right things are being done. Number two, to investigate and prosecute. But the question is, are these offices, number one, independent, as has been provisioned for in the Constitution? We have seen a lot of interference with those offices. We have seen a lot of, the government playing these institutions. For example, ensuring that they don't have adequate resources to ensure that they can implement, what they're supposed to do. And so when you deny institutions like IPOA, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, resources, for example, to investigate, then how are we expected to ensure that there's accountability? Number two, look at the role of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Again, an office that is so critical in this country in safeguarding human rights. But we have seen them denied resources. They're not able to function. And so this political game needs to end. And when you talk about the broad-based government, what we have seen is, and Kenyans need to awaken now and see that these leaders are all together.
Okay.
There's no difference between them at the moment, and we need a new breed of leadership.
All right.
Now, the broad-based government has...
We'll proceed with the broad-based aspect after the break, of course. But first, before that, to Suba Churchill joining us from the county of Homa Bay. Suba, such a grim reality is it, given what the reports do point out?
Yes, thank you very much. It's unfortunate my connectivity broke down, but I think one of the tragedies of our moment is the inability of the Kenya Kwanza government to translate its promises, very sounding ideals into reality for the people of Kenya. It will be recalled that in the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, which they have called the pre-stand as the bottom-up approach, there were a lot of lofty ideals and promises to ensure that Kenyans enjoy their fundamental rights. We saw a number of banners across the city reading "Freedom is coming." Yet increasingly, and as Kenya Kwanza continues in its first term in office, we increasingly see a deliberate and conscious attempt by the powers that be encroach on the rights and the freedoms of the Kenyan people, including the very basic of just associating with each other. We have seen, young people voicing very legitimate concerns about governance, about how the country is run, about lack of inclusion of their legitimate concerns in the 2024 budget. And all this has been met with brute force. And so, as a sector, we are increasingly concerned.
All right, we'll get back to Suba once we get back from the break here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X is Citizen Day Break. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. More after the break here on the broadcast. Stay tuned.